Hello, and thank you for choosing to watch this pre-recorded Shorthand webinar. This is our full training session and our most comprehensive overview of Shorthand. This session lasts around an hour and a half in total. So firstly then, a little bit of an introduction into Shorthand, what it is, what it's used for. Well, Shorthand is an online editor. You use the editor to create beautiful and engaging stories for the web. So we do call them stories. They are in fact web pages. And the types of stories that you can create can be a number of different types of content. So you might be working for an NGO or a charity and you're putting together campaigns. You might be working for a publishing or a news organization and putting together news or features. You might be working for a professional services firm and you're looking to put together annual reports. You might even be, kind of any organization looking to put together kind of internal comms for your sort of internal group, your internal team as well. So there are so many different use cases of shorthand. And why do people use shorthand? Well, as you can see sort of from this video here, it's a really easy to use editor. It's especially aimed at writers and editors. And what we often find is that the CMS, the content management systems that we're using, can be quite restrictive. They usually give you the opportunity to add a video or maybe an image at the top, text underneath, and that's about it. And if you kind of want to do anything more dynamic or engaging there, you need to sort of know coding or you're using embeds. Well, with shorthand, you can use images, you can use our different section types to create some really interactive and engaging features. And many of those that use shorthand, for example, if you were to have a look at some of our case studies here and read through some of the anecdotal information in those and some of the stats as well, you'll see that many of those that use shorthand not only find the system itself easy to use, but they're often reporting 10 times more engagement on the shorthand stories compared to those that are created on their traditional CMS system. So you're coming into shorthand, you're putting your words and your images, your videos all together in that editor, and then you're crafting a story that's going to be either embedded or published to your own site. And we will go through the publishing options in a bit more detail. So not only do we have the case studies, we have kind of 6 hero stories on our website here. I would recommend taking a look at View More Stories. This goes through to our featured stories page. So if you wanted to get an idea of some of the stories that are being created on Shorthand at the moment, I would always suggest looking at what others are doing. We'll be looking at some more examples in reference to the different sections that we're going to look at. But these are all really good examples of shorthand stories that you can kind of have a look at and a read through. As well as that, we do have a really informative blog as well. So you'll often find us putting news and information on here about different features that we've put together on Shorthand that we've just released. You'll also find kind of more generic, wider storytelling tips on this blog as well as plenty of examples of other stories, again, that have been told using Shorthand. Now, before I jump into my own shorthand dashboard, I will just reference the plans page as well. So I know that everyone actually on the session today is already signed up for a plan. That's fantastic. So sometimes those will join these sessions as well that are not signed up for a plan. So it's just good to reference this page. And as you'll see, we have 3 different tiers of plan. We have Prime, Pro, and Premium. So the amount of features, the different kind of features that you have available to you will vary depending on which plan your organization or yourself has opted to go for. So just worth knowing that that's there. So I'll just jump into my dashboard now. So as you can see, I've got lots of stories that I've worked on at different times that I can kind of continue working with. I also have my team structure down here as well. So in my training account, I actually have 3 teams. I have demos, training, and then webinars as well. Over here in the top right hand side, I can access some settings regarding my own subscription and regarding my own kind of login as well, so password changes and things like that. that I can all access from here. And because I'm the owner of this organization, I can also look at things like subscription details, manage members, and then things like API tokens, which relate to the publishing as well. So the different things that you'll see here will very much depend on what your user kind of status is in Shorthand. So whether you're a user or whether you're an admin or whether or not you are an owner of an organization. And either you would have signed up for one of our trials on Shorthand by just clicking this button here, and then if you've then signed up for a plan, you'll still be logging into that trial, but that trial will be upgraded. Or like those who are on the call today, many of you have been invited by the owner of your workspace, who is usually your manager. They've invited you into this workspace so that you can start putting your stories together. So I will just reference support very quickly down here. So you can access all of our support documents from here as well in the main dashboard, but I will go through that in a bit more information in a little while. What I'm really going to spend most of the time concentrating on today is creating a new story. So I'll click new story, and then I need to select which team I want to create this in. So either my training, my webinars, or my demos. So I'm going to pick my training team for this one. And then it's going to ask me whether or not I want to create a blank story or whether or not I want to start with one of our templates. Now, I would recommend starting with a blank story. Those that have been sort of most successful with their stories have usually plotted their story out on paper first as well. So I say paper, but I mean, sort of using a Google Doc or maybe a Word doc, maybe even using paper, or maybe even using Post-it notes on a board or a wall or something like that, just so you're mapping out the kind of key features of this story before you're then kind of working in Shorthand. And of course, you'll have all your assets, your images, your videos kind of saved in a shared place, like a shared drive or just on your main hard drive. So if you're just getting started though, you can by all means click one of these templates. They've all been really, really well crafted together to showcase a lot of the different sections and features that we have in Shorthand. So we're in this template now, we're in the editor, and you can see that we have our different sections queued up here on the left-hand side. So I can kind of scroll through that to see what's already been put into this story. And then I can move my cursor into this middle section of the story and start scrolling through it as well within the editor. So this particular story has been put together to really showcase our reveal section with text in it. So that's what this is doing, sort of going through those images that have been added in here, scrolling through, and then the text is changing as well. You'll be able to identify what each section is by the little tag here. So we've got 3, reveal. Now if we scroll up, we'll see this is a text section, for example. So you could use this as a starting point. You could move around these sections. You could delete the text that's already here and then type in your own. You can also change all of the media that exists here as well. But as I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on creating a new blank story. Also, if it's your first time using Shorthand, you'll see many of these little red dots placed as well, just kind of letting you know about different parts of the editor. So this time I've got my blank story. This time I'm starting with no sections queued on the the left-hand side. So I've just got my title section there and then no sections underneath. I can see that I've got a shorthand header at the top here. Now I can change some attributes of this header. So I could actually hide this header altogether if I didn't want it there. I could also just hide the shorthand logo and then add in my own logo here. I can also change the colors of the header as well, so the text color or the background color here. Now, at the moment, I'm using a shorthand theme. So within this training workspace, I just have the shorthand basic and the shorthand blue theme, which is what everyone has available to them when they first start out with shorthand and if they decide to remain on a prime plan. If you opt for a pro plan or above, you will have access to create your own theme. So you would send us your font details, your logo details, and so on. You'd fill out our form, which is in our support documents, and will be sent to you during the onboarding stages. And then our designer would put your theme together for you. And then once that's ready, we'll add it into your account. So only your account, so only you can see it. And then you'll be able to apply it to stories in the same way that I'm applying these shorthand themes. So the best way to think of a theme is that it controls the look and feel of the page. So as well as our header up here, we also have our footer down the bottom. Now, most stories, about 99% of stories have the built with the shorthand footer on the bottom of them. We do have an option for white labeling within our plans as well. So if you wanted to remove the footer, then you would need to add that white label add-on. That's the only way to remove the footer that's in agreement with our terms. So we start with our title section, and then we're going to add sections one by one, and there are 8 sections in total. So just to kind of go over what those sections are, we have the title section and the text over media section, which are very similar. These allow you to have large text placed over your full screen image or your autoplay videos. Then we have the text section, which allows you a column of text either on the left, the right, or the middle. Then we have the background scrollmation. This is where you can have a text column again on the left, the middle, or the right-hand side. And then behind that, you'll have either multiple images or a single image. Then we have the scrollmation section. We can have a column on the left or the right-hand side. And then in the opposing side, you'll have another column within which sits your image or your images. And these two sections, the background scrollmation and the scrollmation, as you move through that, the images will change. Then we have our reveal section. So this is where you can have those full screen images that transition as you scroll through, and you can also add text boxes onto those images as well. Then we have the media section, which is where you can have full screen video. So that will be foreground video, or you can have an image that will not be cropped on any device, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Then you have custom HTML. And then we have the collection section, which allows you to create onward journeys at the end of your story, or allows you to create microsites where you can actually have a collection of stories or a collection of articles all together in one place. You'll see at the bottom we have 1 out of 25 sections used. So we do put a cap on everyone when they first start using shorthand, and that's because we've done a lot of testing and we found that stories do tend to perform at their best when they're at around 25 sections long. So that's why that cap is there. The caveat to that is we can increase that for you, but what we would say is you need to take extra care when it comes to all of our media guidelines and making sure that you're meeting those and not increasing the load of your page, making sure that it's going to work really well on all different devices. So I'll start editing this section then so you can see how it's works. So let's start with the edit media. So on this section, you can either have a full screen image or you can have a full screen video. So I'll start with the video. The video will be looping, muted, and it will also autoplay. So we call this background video within shorthand. So you can have background video within the title and the text over media sections. And then you can have foreground video that has sound, but will need to be clicked and played by your readers within the media section and also inline within text columns. So you have part of your media guidelines already visible here for you to see. If you wanted more context about the media guidelines, you just need to click there and it will bring up the support panel and you can read through how this section works and also see all of the media guidelines, both for images and video. So I've got some pre-prepared media that I'm going to put into this story. So I'm actually going to start with a rather large video file. I want to show you that, despite definitely it's worth making yourself familiar with all of the media guidelines within shorthand. If you do happen to add in a large video or you use a PNG instead of a JPEG, then shorthand will tell you to optimize that media by showing you these warnings. So worth paying attention to those. Now, we do have an other resources support document, where we reference some video compression services that you could use. So one is Clipchamp and one is Handbrake. These will both allow you to dramatically reduce the size of your videos without reducing the quality of the tool at all. And what I have done is I've already got a compressed version of my video that I used Handbrake. So I just downloaded that onto my own computer, compressed that, and now I can put that in. And as you can see, that warning has now disappeared. Now, one of the other reasons, as well as being so easy to use and the fantastic engagement times that you get on shorthand stories, not only that, but it's the ability for them to work across all different devices. So the way that we've built this editor, of course, is so that you can see the widescreen, you can see how the tool screen is going to work. And we do have a lot of adaptations, optimizations that you can make as well to your stories to make sure that they are going to work fantastically across all different devices. So that's another really big reason for using shorthand. So the other thing I need to do in here is I just need to add in a fallback image. So I can see sort of all views of the title section. I can see how the video is going to look on widescreen and tool screen. And this is an automatic crop of the video for the tool screen. But if I wanted to, I could add in a separate video for the mobile version if I wanted to, if I had a portrait video available for that. With my fallback image, that's going to be important because immediately before the video starts playing, that image is going to come into sight for the reader. Also, if the video cannot play for any reason, maybe the reader has a particularly old mobile phone device, or maybe they've blocked autoplay video on their device, then you can be sure that they're going to see that video instead, see the image instead of the video. The other thing that you can do within this panel is also add a caption, and you'll see I just need to click Save Changes there to make sure my media is added into shorthand. So as soon as that's uploaded, I'll see the preview button come available. And then I can preview my story. I've not really done much to it so far, but I can see how that's going to look. To edit your text, you just need to highlight the text that's here, delete the text, and then add in a title here. So I'm just going to write my title for demonstration purposes. And then in the other text box, I'm also going to write subtitle. They can change the size of these as well. So you can change it point by point just on the left-hand side here. And then over on the right-hand side, you can also change the alignment of the text as well. Highlight the text and you can see bold, italic, underline, strike through, subscript, superscript. You can hyperlink any piece of text within shorthand. And if you do, you always want to click open a new window so you're not directing the reader away from the story too early on. And also, if you have colors enabled on your workspace, then you'll be able to change the text colors here as well. And because I'm working within that shorthand theme, all of those text colors are within that shorthand palette. Exactly the same for the subtitle here. I can change the size over there. I highlight the text and I see all those different formatting options, and I can also change the alignment as well. Now, in between each of these little text fields, you'll see that I can insert media as well. So this is called foreground media. I'm just going to click Save Changes just to show you what that looks like. And you'll see it's just added the shorthand logo for now. This is really useful if you're working maybe on commercial stories and you're thinking about how you might be able to commercialize those and get sponsorship, for example. You could maybe have a title here, maybe have in association with, and then the logo to say sort of what company is working with you on that story. Not just to say commercial stories as well, it could be maybe you're a charity and maybe you're actually partnering with another organization and you'd like to show that you are on that story. Down the bottom, you also get the opportunity to add in a byline. It doesn't have to be a byline, it's just added like that by default, but you could put something like scroll down to give your readers an extra prompt, or you could just leave it entirely blank. With all the text fields in shorthand, you can leave those blank if you wish and just serve an image or a video on its own. Now, on every section, you have those section options, a bit like we saw with the header earlier on, but you do get them for every section as well. So you can start to change actually whether or not you would like this particular section to appear on all devices or just on mobile or just on desktop. You can also change whether or not you would like to use the full layout, a half layout, or if you would like to use a text-only layout. So as you can see, it actually removes that video that I've added entirely, and then I could just have that as maybe a colored background with a simple title and a subtitle there. So there are a few different options for the layout there. So just going back to that full layout, you can also change this to a half layout or a third layout. And I haven't got anything underneath that, so you can't, it's sort of looking quite blank underneath at the moment. You can change this to a light or a dark, or we can use those custom colors as well. You can lighten or darken the overlay here, so to make that text stand out more or less kind of over your video or image. You can also change the overlay type as well. So that can be quite a subtle change. You can add a text fade out. So I'll show you as I move on to the next section that this will fade as I move through. And you can also change the positioning of this as well. So what I will do is I'll just add in my text over media after here so we can start to see the movement of the two sections. If I scroll down, you'll see that will fade very subtly. And then also if I change this to a scrolls position, so it scrolls with the story, and if I change that back to a fixed position, you'll see the video actually stays in the same place, and then the rest of the story scrolls over the top of it. So you can make some really nice effects there. I'll move on now to the text over media section. So this is very similar to the title section. It's where you can have your text, your large text over your videos or your images. So to edit the media, again, you go to edit media on the top left-hand side. And this time I'm going to add in an image. So I've added in my image there. I've adhered to all the media guidelines here. So my image is 2560 by 1440 pixels. I can see more about those media guidelines by clicking there again as well. So I can see on my widescreen version that this image is working pretty well, but on the tall screen version, what's happening is Shorthand is cropping to the center of that image, and that's not going to work as well. So what I need to do is I either need to add a separate image for mobile with these dimensions, or I need to just set the focus point here so that I'm telling Shorthand what is the most important part of that image and getting Shorthand to recrop that image for me. What I can also do here is add a caption again and alternative text for screen readers. Now I will send a follow-up email after today with some kind of hints and tips on which support documents to familiarize yourself with. And one of those will be a blog post about accessibility. If you do want to find out more about that, it's an important issue of course and how you make these stories accessible for all readers. So have a read through that, and if you do have any follow-up questions, then do let us know. So I'm just going to wait for my media to upload. And I'm just going to add my text here now. So I'm just going to add NYC here, and then I'm just going to orientate that over onto the right-hand side. And then I'm just going to take it to preview again. So the preview link is always going to be the kind of truest representation of how the story is going to look once it's published to a live environment. So once you're actually sharing it live with your readers for real. And the preview link is indeed a testing link. So this link should never be shared publicly. By all means, please share it with colleagues and clients though for sign off, but it should never be shared directly from your own website or never be shared from social media. So going back to the text over media section then and just going through some of the section options again here. So we can see we get that visibility again. We have the layout again that we can opt for the full, the half, or we can go for that text only. So if I go for the half here, you'll note that actually it's bumped the Statue of Liberty over to the side here. So what I'd need to do is go back into Edit Media and then set the focus. Because this is a 2560 by 1440 image and the focal point is off to the left-hand side, it's just knocking it over within that layout. So I just need to make sure I've set my focal point there, and then that will make sure that that looks really good in that particular section there. What I also might want to do then is maybe change the orientation of this to the center as well. So that's going to work a little bit better there. The other things that you can do with that layout is you can decide whether or not you want that on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. And you can also change it to the top or bottom for mobile as well. Now, we're not seeing that change over, of course, though, because we're not looking at the mobile kind of experience. So if we wanted to see how that's going to look, we would take it to the simulator, and then we can see how our title section is going to look on there. And now we can also see how that's going to look on mobile as well. And in hindsight, because I haven't got much text on that particular kind of option there, I might also decide to maybe go back to the full version there, and that looks a bit better. I can also decide to go for the half height or the third height. Again, what I'm going to do though is I'm just going to add in another text section here, again, just to get the movement of the page so you can see how all of the sections kind of relate and complement one another. So if I change that to a half layout, that's how it will look. And I can change that to a third layout as well. I can also add that light or dark background. I have my overlay again and my overlay type. I also this time have a text fade in and a text fade out. So I might add text fade out there. And then I have my background positioning as well. So I have a scrolls position at the moment. So you'll see it's just sort of moving with the whole of the story. The way that this is cropped at the moment isn't really going to sort of make best use of this particular image. Whereas if I change this to a fixed position, actually it acts as a little window onto the Statue of Liberty, and at any one point I see different parts of it. So that kind of treatment would work much better there. Now, in regards to sort of looking at some other examples, I will just show you this story by Penguin that they put together. And they've used some different height text over media sections kind of break up the flow of the story. So this is sort of one of the ones I was thinking of here. So it's a third height text over media section. We've got that text to the center there. And then they've created these assets, these images that they have sitting behind here, and they have quotes over the top as sort of to introduce the next section, but works really well. I have that all throughout the story there, and it gives the story its own sort of identity, and they have different colors for different sections and so on. Another good example of sort of utilization of the text over media sections is this story by Woodland Trust. So it's a story about trees. And here, this again is a text over media section set to a half height this time. We can tell that because it sits at around half height of that viewport that we're looking at. And then they use again the text over media sections here. So that's a full height text over media section with a half height text over media section sandwiched in between another full height section to kind of show how that area has changed. And they employ that kind of effect throughout this story. And it makes for a really, really nice experience, especially sort of that bit there. We have the bird very close to the screen. So I'll carry on to the text section now. So this is where you can have a column of text that sits on the left, the middle, or the right-hand side. Now this section will actually grow or shrink depending on how much text you add into it as well. And I should mention that this is true for the title and the text over media section. So while these sections are often most frequently used for kind of large text over the top of your video or your image, you can actually add more text into these and it won't risk being cut off. So I could just maybe copy this section here. I might make this maybe a full height version here. Delete my text. I'm just going to add in that text here. So now you'll see all of that text is scrolling. The image is staying still, but you can see all of that text there. So you could use that particular section for more text if you wanted to as well. But for the majority of the text, you might decide to use a text section here for your kind of your main prose. And you have a number of different features that you can use here. So I'm just going to make this a little bit longer. And then I'll show you some of the different text formatting options here. So we're just in paragraph text at the moment, but you do get 3 different types of headers. You can change the alignment over here as well, much like you could in the title and text over media section. Every time you create a paragraph break, each one will act as its own block. So we might start this section with a drop cap. I'll make this one a little bit smaller, and then we might maybe have a block quote here. We might decide that this one needs to be an indent, and then maybe let's do one a little bit further down, but we'll decide that this one's going to be a breakout, so kind of a little text box there. So I know this is sort of quite simple, and most of the kind of content management systems that you'll use will have different text formatting options here, but certainly lots of different ways that you can format your text within Shorthand. Not only that, when you do highlight the text, you do get the bold, italic, underline, strike through, subscript, superscript, ability to hyperlink any piece of text, and of course those color options as well if you have those unlocked on your account or you have added a number of different colors to your theme. Now, every time you do add a paragraph break as well, like here and here and here, you'll notice that you can add in different types of media in line. So let's maybe start sort of down here where we haven't got anything else formatted at the moment. So start with insert media. So you can add in an image from your own devices. So I do have an image prepared, kind of retaining that city theme, which I'll add in. Just an image of Singapore there. I can add a caption in as well, and alternative text, and I could have this linking out to another web page if I wanted to. I can also make this smaller or extend the whole width of the column. So with the media, it's not just images, you can also add a video. So this will be foreground video. It will have sound and your readers will need to click and play that video. It'll also have a caption as well, if you want it to. You can also add YouTube videos. To do this, you just need the YouTube link where the video appears. And then you also need a SoundCloud link as well to put in audio. So I'll save the video just so you can see how that looks. I'm going to add a little bit more text here, just at the bottom, so I can keep showing you the different options. So create another break there. And then I'll just show you how to insert buttons. So this could be a way to have a donate button or maybe clicking out to maybe a newsletter subscription page. A lot of customers will use it for e-commerce stories as well. Just to show you how it works, I'm just going to take our featured stories and then I'm just going to add the link in here, put in featured stories, open a new window, and then I've got my button there. So I can also change the color of this button and I can change the size of the button as well. Next up, you can insert a divider. So this can just act as a decorative piece to your stories, or you might have it where you're switching focus of the prose within maybe the same text section. And you can also change the color and the size of the divider as well. Next up is a spacer. So if I just delete that for a second and simply add just lots of paragraph breaks in here, you'll see when we take this to preview, it's actually not going to render that gap. So what we do need to do if we wanted sort of physical white space within the shorthand story is we do need to add in that spacer physically. So I've just moved that to 80% and then I'll take it out to preview so we can see how it looks. So there we go, there's the white space there. And you can very easily delete that as well. And last but not least, you can add custom HTML. So we haven't really got on to the most exciting elements of shorthand yet. Of course, the title and text over media sections are great for having that really immersive, full screen media. But the scrollmation, the reveals, are certainly very exciting in terms of creating kind of flipbook animation effects within your stories. But even though you do get the ability to create lots of exciting interactive features within shorthand, if you are already using third-party tools, maybe things like if I pull up this support document, you'll see there's a number that we mention in there. They're all tools that we've seen being used to great effect. So things like Infogram, things like ThingLink, PictoChart, Timeline.js, Data Wrapper. These are all really handy third-party tools that you can integrate into, any content management system, but also shorthand as well. Not only that though, but if you are sort of not interested in using third-party tools like that, you still might be interested in using things like Twitter or Instagram or maybe Facebook. Maybe you're writing a story and there's been a particularly engaging or important tweet about that, and you would like to include that in the story as well for context. Well, that's exactly where the custom HTML block is going to come really handy here. So I'm just going on to Shorthand's Twitter, and I'll just take our pinned tweet here. So just embed tweet, copy that code, and then I'll take it over to Shorthand. I'll always see the raw code within the editor, but when I take that out to preview, it will render. So that was the text section. We'll now move on to the background scrollmation section. And this is where you can have a column that sits on the left, the middle, or the right-hand side. And then behind that text column, you'll have either one or multiple images. And if you have more than one image, what's going to happen is as you scroll through the story, those images will change from one to the other. So I'll just show you some examples to start with, just so you can get an idea of how it works. So the first example is the story about the Yemen Peace Project. And here you'll see that this is a background scrollmation section. We have the column in the center here. This is inline media. And then in the background, what they have is they've created these graphics that sort of start off with just a few squares there. And then as we scroll through, you'll notice that they change. And that was a fading transition that they had on there as well, so that those squares, sort of faded in as you scroll through. A slightly different example would be the story by the Sky, by Sky about D-Day. And this is the background scrollmation here. So again, we have a column to the center. And then as we scroll through, that's just one image in the background, so it doesn't change. So just because you can have one image doesn't mean you have to have, just because you can have more than one image doesn't mean you have to. You can just have one image within the background as well. It really depends on the effect that you're trying to create. Now, there is one little caveat I need to show you about this section, and that's that the sort of changer of the image is completely powered by how much content you have in the column itself. So if we take away the majority of the text and we try and sort of scroll through, you'll see that we get that kind of the overlay stopping there, which we can change within section options. We can make that overlay completely transparent. But of course, the images are changing far too quickly there, and we're actually not seeing all of the images. So you need to think about the effect that you want to create. What do you want to sort of show the audience about your story at that point in the narrative, and how many images do you want to show, and how much text or how much content do you have in this column as well? Because of course you can add media into this column. You could actually have spaces in here as well to make that column extend for longer. But we're thinking about how all of that works together. Now, before I create my own flipbook animation style effect here, just want to show you the different section options that you get. So you do get visibility here as well. You get the colors, you get the overlay again. So if I just go to this image, which is not as dark as the first gorilla image, you'll see we can put that overlay completely transparent. Now, just again, another cautionary sort of warning here. If you are considering putting that overlay to 0%, just make sure that the image or the images behind your text are not too busy. If they are really busy, then what you'll find is it might be difficult for your audience to read that text over those images. So just think about how the text and how the images and sort of everything in the story is working together. You also can add in a text fade. So this will show when the story, when you scroll down to that particular point of the story, and you can also add a slow or a fast fading transition in between each of the images as well. So I'm actually just going to kind of come out of that. I'm going to add this to my navigation as well. So if I just scroll to the top here, you'll see sort of what I'm building within the header. And I just need to make sure that my sort of colors are right here. So I might just make that, there we go. So I'm just going to add this to the navigation. So background scrollmation. And then I'm just going to add my text over media section as well. And then I'm going to call this title, but you might call that something like home. So you'll see what I'm doing now. I'm just building up a navigation here at the top. You don't have to add all sections to your navigation. You only have to add the ones that you want to. But this is going to help me when I'm demonstrating each of these different sections to you now, because now I can actually sort of move down to the different sections that I might want to at a particular time. But just to show you that text fade in on the background scrollmation, and then the fade in between each of the images as well. So I'm going to go back into section options. I'm actually going to take both of those effects off, and then I'm going to add in my own images. So just waiting for those to upload now. So that's now loaded. So I'll show you what I've just created. So I've got a series of images taken from an aerial view of Paris and put them one after the other in this background scrollmation section. So hopefully it creates that kind of nice flipbook animation style effect there. Now this is a good opportunity to show you what this is going to look like in the phone kind of preview as well. So I can use my hamburger nav here as well if I wanted to maybe jump down to that section a little bit quicker. So here I have my image partially in view, and then the text will come over the top of those images. So in the background, they're still changing from one to the other, but of course, because I have less kind of real estate, less space here on the mobile phone version, the text has to come over the top there. So bear that in mind for the way that the background scrollmation works, and then we're going to continue with the scrollmation section. So the scrollmation section is where you can have a column on the left or the right hand side, and then in the opposing column you'll have a column within which sits your image or your images. Now in this example we have 4 images within total. And of course, they change as we scroll. Now, this section works a little bit differently on the mobile phone view. If I just scroll down, you can see the image is actually at the top of the screen. And then as we scroll through, the images will change. Now, there is another way that you can have this featuring on mobile. If I just click here, now, every time you add in a paragraph break, you'll see, of course, the media button, divider, spacer, HTML that we saw earlier, but you'll also see the option to insert scrollmation in line. And you'll only see this on the scrollmation section. So I'm just picking the middle 2 images there. You don't need to pick all the images. You might think that you want to create that kind of flipbook animation style on desktop. Maybe you don't want to create it on mobile because you don't think it's going to be as effective at the top of the screen. So instead, you could choose just to have a couple of the images showing rather than having all of the images there. The other reason is for the size of the image. You might find that the size of the images is going to be, portrait. It's not really going to work if it's sort of at the top of the screen because it has to be in that kind of 16:9 panel ratio. Whereas if it's more of a portrait image and you put it in line, then potentially that would work a lot better. I'm just going to add this to the nav. I'm going to remove these, ready for when I'm going to create my own scrollmation section. Before I do, I'll just show you an example of the scrollmation section in action as I did for the background scrollmation. And for this one, I'll show you this story called Balancing the Books. So I will use the nav here to scroll down a little bit. So here we have our scrollmation. We have a chart here on the right hand side, and there's a series of images that have been put into this scrollmation so that as we scroll through this, it appears as if those charts, that they're actually filling up with the data there. And of course, that's a series of images completely powered by the user's scroll. So I'm going to add my own images. So as you saw earlier, you can either delete the images one by one, or you can just delete them all. And then I'm just going to drop mine in. So what you might have already noticed is that I've added in the same images for the scrollmation that I added into the background scrollmation section. Now, this is so to show you sort of how that will look a bit different. So I go down to my scrollation section here, and you can see that I've got the images at the top there. Of course, what's going to happen in this version is that as I scroll through, it's going to give me that same sort of effect that I had earlier on the desktop version of the background scrollation section. So that's given me an idea. What I'm going to do is actually going to decide that I only want my background scrollation section to appear on desktop and that I only want my scrollation section to appear on mobile. And then if I take this to phone preview here, I'll start with desktop from this view so that we can see. So that's what we'll have on the desktop version. And then on the phone version, of course, we'll have the scrollmation experience of that. So this isn't always to say that you're going to use background scrollmation on desktop and always use scrollmation on mobile, but it's simply to show you that with shorthand at your fingertips, hopefully you'll begin to see that the editor gives you so many different ways of crafting your narrative. I mean, not thousands of different ways, so it makes it overwhelming and confusing. But 8 different section types that you can tailor for different devices as well. So you might actually have background scrollmations sometimes on desktop, sometimes on mobile, depending on the images that you've got to kind of tell that story, and depending on that kind of effect that you want to create at that certain time as well. So the next section I want to show you is the reveal section, and this is where you can have multiple full screen images, one after the other, and place a transition between them. So we'll start off with just the images themselves, but you can see there's a little text box here if you want it as well. But as you scroll through, those images will change. Now to see what's going on here a little bit more closely, we can go to Edit Media and we can see our 3 images here. Also, we can see the transitions between them. So here we have a fade, and on this one, we have an upwards transition. So just to go through that again, that's the fade, and that's the upwards transition. So, and those are the 3 images that we've got added in. So there are a number of different effects that you can create with the reveal. I'll show you a couple of examples. I always think it's really good to, as I said at the beginning, to look at different examples, different ways in which other customers have employed the use of these. I'll start with this one. So this is a story by CAFOD, or Catholic Agency for Overseas Development, about the water issue in Uganda. And it starts off kind of reading a bit like a graphic novel, and that everything is animated and it tells this story. And what they did at this kind of really poignant point in the story is they go from the kind of animation that they've had all the way through, and then they kind of plunge you into real life. So you start with that cartoon, and then you transition. The reader, again, all I'm doing is moving my mouse, is I'm plunged into real life here in this kind of very bleak image of the boy of Fabiano and what happened to him. So just one reveal. Another example of that would be this story by the BBC. So this is much more of a data kind of led story about the current pandemic that we're going through at the moment. And if I scroll down, there is a reveal here, but this is not the particular one I want to show you. It's much more of a data kind of led one here about the confirmed cases. So again, what they've done is they've created this graphic. They've inserted it into shorthand as an image. This is the first image. And then we have a swipe this time. So we're moving from the left to the right, sort of bringing in that new image. And this is what I kind of referred to earlier, and one of the reasons that many will use shorthand is, again, not just the ease of use, and the engagement metrics, and not just the fact that it's going to work across all different devices as well, but to be a writer or an editor, maybe working with either a couple of graphic designers or maybe even none, but you don't have to be a coder to put these stories together. You don't need to know HTML, you don't need to know JavaScript or CSS. You can simply put together a graphic here. You can have images that you might already have for maybe print magazines and other stuff that you're perhaps working on, and inject them into shorthand and use the tools at your fingertips, like the reveal, to kind of transition between the images or the graphics that you have available. So I will delete all of the images in here. I'll show you quite a simple version of the reveal now, with just a couple of images. I'm kind of keeping that city theme again. So I've got a couple of images, New York at nighttime and New York in the daytime. And I'll just wait for these to load and then I'll run you through them. So now those images have loaded in. I'm actually going to just swap them around to start with the daytime, and then I'm going to transition into the nighttime version there. So at the moment, I've got no transition in between the images. I might want to try maybe a fade here, so I kind of fade from light to dark, or I could maybe try a left, or the right was what we saw earlier on that other story. But I think what's going to work best here is going to be a downward swipe, so sort of night is falling on New York. Now, if you wanted to experiment with adding text to these sections as well, this is a fairly recent introduction into shorthand, so there are not many sort of examples to show on this just yet, but there will be in the future. But I'm just going to put in day here and then put this into the center. And then I'm just going to put night here. Again, make that a large header there and then move it to the center. And then I'll take this to preview this time. I haven't yet added it to my navigation, but I can very easily do that. So I can just add it there. And then what you'll actually notice about the reveal section, about the preview, is that when I've added that into the reveal section, I can simply just give that a little push refresh. And now that's going to be added into the nav for me. So the way that that works is the image will come into view first. And you can already see that text box is starting to very subtly kind of creep in there. As you continue to scroll, that text box will scroll in and out of view, and then you'll have your transition on the image, and then the next text box will come in. And then this sort of stops because this is the bottom of our story now, so that's going to stay in the middle there because there's nothing underneath it. So the next section I want to show you is the media section. And this is where you can add in a couple of different types of media. So first you can add in an image. You can also add in a video here, so an MP4 from your own files, adhering to all of our guidelines regarding the sizes. Or you can add in a YouTube video here as well. So the video is very much like before, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining the image here. So the image does have a guideline of 2560 by 1440 pixels, but if you added in an image that was actually a lot shorter than that here, that would still work. And the reason for that is this image, or this section I should say, is a little bit different. It's not a full screen image, so it has this border that goes all the way around that protects it. So if you think back to the other sections that we've been working with today, we have that title section, the text over media section. Actually, if I just move that back to a full screen version, that's going to kind of demonstrate my point a little bit more clearly. And then we've got our background scrollmation section and also our reveal section. But what you'll notice about these, they're all full screen. So the image or the video completely fills the entirety of the screen. Now, one way that we sort of enable that to happen is we have what we call safe area guides. So if I go to edit media here, you might have noticed it when I was adding media before and maybe thought, what are those? But you have that dotted outline across all of those sections, so approximate safe area guide. So what that's telling you is we need to add images that are our recommendation to 2560 1440 pixels, and that is the best image size to kind of work across all of the different devices. And of course, you get the opportunity to add the focal point, to add in different images as well. However, there are so many different device sizes out there. Even myself sitting here sort of on my laptop here, I can make that a lot smaller. I can sort of roughly mimic mobile size here. I can even sort of have it that size as well, which is a bit more like tablet. But what Shorthand is doing with that image or the video is automatically sort of working with the image, recropping it. So the aspect ratio of that image is actually changing as we change the screen size. So the approximate area safe guide basically tells you what is safe from being cut off on various devices. So everything outside of that dotted line runs the risk of being cut off, whereas everything inside is much safer. So now this is true background media, and it's not really going to matter if a street lamp gets slightly cut off here. But if I maybe was working with that BBC story and I had critical kind of data about the coronavirus that I wanted the readers to understand, then I wouldn't want any of that information to be cut off. So I'll just show you how the safe area guide works though. So if we just look at the street lamp just here, there's a point that I'll get to where that street lamp will disappear, which is around here. So what I would do when you're working with shorthand as well, if you are using graphs and graphics and things like that, is have a look at our safe area guide support document, download the transparent PNG here, and you can put that on your images and your videos to just check that they're going to work in that format. If you're working with videographers or photographers, then you can also share that with them, and that will really help them to just take the right video, to take the right picture, and be sure that it is going to work in that format. So the next section is a custom HTML section. So again, here you could use this to inject HTML or code from your existing site. You could use it to embed third-party tools as well. So a third-party tool that's often used quite regularly is Google Maps. So I'm just going to put that up on screen. And then I'm just going to copy the HTML directly from Google Maps and then put it into my story. And as you'll see, the Google Maps doesn't look particularly good on the first go. Now, the reason for that is it's nothing to do with shorthand. Everything in shorthand when you're working with it is completely responsive. So shorthand is kind of geared up to recognize whether or not the story is on a mobile, whether it's on a tablet, or whether it's on a desktop, and gives you the ability to cater for each of the devices. However, what has happened with this code is we've just taken it directly from Google And while it's a fantastic resource and would certainly recommend using it, it doesn't give you responsive code. So we found this little tool a couple of years ago, which is really handy. So what it enables you to do is take this code that we've just taken from Google and then give it to embed responsively, click embed, and then it will return responsive code to you. So if you did want to know what it's doing, it's just changing the width and the height to 100% so that that code is 100% going to fill the area within which it's pasted into. But if if you don't know code or you're a bit worried about kind of adding the values in when you're not that proficient in code, then that tool is really handy because it just does the work for you. And now you can see this time that it's a full screen map and it's going to work a lot better. Now, the last section I want to show you is the collection section. Before I kind of make a collection section and show you how to use it, I'll show you a couple of examples of collection sections. So first one is Honda Engine Room, and then the next one is like Cambridge. I'm just going to accept that. So with Honda Engine Room, they use the collection section as their kind of main primary navigation around the site. So this is a collection section. So as you can see, it is a collection of images and of titles. And then each of these has a link attached to it, which then goes through to the cars page, for example. So you can read all of the car stories that they have. And then they have another collection section here, which is all of the car stories that they've collected together. Cambridge also use it on the bottom of the majority of their stories as well. So at the bottom here, we have a collection. They have a much longer kind of description on their stories to give a little bit of a flavour of what each of those stories is about as well. We also use it for our featured stories page that I showed you earlier. So they're all styled slightly differently because they all have different themes. Honda Engine Room has its own theme. Cambridge actually used the shorthand theme, and this is in our own craft or sort of marketing web page theme that we have. So the way that you create a collection section is you need to go back into the dashboard here, click New Collection, and then select the team that you would like to create that in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call this just example, today's date, 10th of June. And then I'm just going to say more cities, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, I've got all of my images already, so I am going to pop those in with my sort of my titles. And then actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you might start kind of testing a collection section with shorthand stories, even if you haven't published those shorthand stories, just yet. So I've got 3 images. I've got London here. I'm not going to add a description just yet. As you can see, it is giving me a warning here because I haven't added in my URL yet, but I'm sort of doing that on purpose. Now I'm going to use shorthand previews, by the way, to kind of test how this works. But just to mention, it can be any story from the web. So if you're integrating shorthand, very closely with your own site, then you could actually create a shorthand story on a particular topic. Maybe you make a collection section about that, maybe related stories, but some of the stories are already content that is on your existing web page. Well, the links can be from anywhere. It's just a URL. So you could be linking back to other content that you've done, or maybe even partners have done, and so on. But what I'm going to use all my previews here. So I've got my preview for Cape Town, I've got my preview for Sydney, and then I've got my preview for London. So I'm just opening those up so I can gather them. And then I'm going to click edit here. And then I'm just going to take each one in turn. And then I'm going to edit it here, add the URL, just the preview. Obviously, once this story is published, I wouldn't want to link to the preview. I would need to change that to the published version. But if you are creating, maybe you're hopefully creating a whole kind of hub with shorthand, you want to test how the previews, how the collection sections work, then you might do that as a kind of stopgap there. So I'm just going to publish changes on that. I should mention that is not physically published anywhere. It's published in my dashboard and it's ready to go in a story. So the collection section does not exist on its own right at all. It is an element within which you pull into your stories. So that's now created. So I just need to go to section options here, and then I need to select the one from today. And then I've got it. Here's my More Cities collection section. And each of those is going to click out to the relevant preview there. Now, a few more options to go through. But do start thinking about any questions that you have now, just so we can cover off any questions that you have at the end. We've still got a little bit to go through. So firstly, you can move sections around in shorthand, as you saw earlier. You can create copies of whole sections. So if you sort of took my advice at the beginning and maybe you plot out your story on paper or in a Word doc first, you might know that your story is going to have 5 chapters. After seeing this training session, you might think I'm going to have each chapter introduced with a text over media section, a bit like that penguin story that we had a look at. So you might decide to create that as your first kind of your skeleton there. You put that down, you get into shorthand, you create 5 chapter heads with text over media sections. You might start with that first text over media section, style the text how you want it to the right size, have the image in the background. Maybe you have the same image for each chapter head, sort of running through as a consistent kind of thread through the story. Well, if you decide to copy the section rather than create a whole new section by adding it, if it only references that image once, then that's going to really help with your page load time. So the story is going to load a lot quicker because it's not referencing the same image again and again that's been added in. You can also delete sections very easily, like so, and just be sure that when you delete a section or when you delete an image, just make sure that you definitely want to do that. You can also collaborate with your team members on the story very easily. So you can add them directly into the story like so. It will add Joe Bloggs as an editor. This is if I want him to make changes to the story. If I simply just want him to see a preview, then I could make him a viewer of the story, or I can remove him entirely. Also, I can add someone new to this story. If I go into my dashboard, I can also access those collaboration tools here. So again, I can add Joe Bloggs right here. It makes him a viewer or an editor. I can also change ownership of a story to my team member as well. But to be honest, the only reason I'd want to do this is if I was no longer working on a project or if I was leaving an organization. You can also make a whole copy of a story. And this would be quite handy if you're putting a story into multiple languages and maybe you wanted to start with English first and then copy it out and then use a translation service to make other examples of that. You can also add notes to this as well. So I can add a note here. So maybe I just want to say that this is my second draft. And then that was my original. Maybe I want to start changing parts of the story, but I don't want to lose what I already had. Or maybe I want to retain my own version before I share the second draft with colleagues. Going back into the editor, I want to talk to you a little bit about the icons along the top here. So firstly, the settings. This is where you're going to add in the metadata for the story when it's published to a live environment. So you can add the title and description here. You'll note that at the moment the title and the description are coming directly from your title section. So you can leave that as the default, and actually we'd always recommend leaving the title the same, but the description, if the subtitle makes sense upon the image or the video that you've got within that context, you might want to change that and add something a bit more detailed for search results and social media though. You can also add in authors and keywords. Now, I have all publishing options unlocked on this account, so I'll talk you through the publishing options in a second. But if you are publishing to your own servers, you will see this option like me. If you're publishing using shorthand hosting, you will not see this. You don't have to worry about this. You can also add a publish date here, and this is just going to add a publish date meta tag to your story. Down here, you can also add Google Analytics. So this is the way in which you would add Google Analytics to your story on an ad hoc or story by story basis. If you have a theme though, and you're on a pro or above plan, then we would highly recommend adding your Google Analytics or any other tracking ID for that matter to your theme. And then that way it's going to appear on every story that you put together and publish. Next up is the social sharing buttons. You can access them from here, or you can just click here in the header as well. We have Facebook and Twitter as standard. So you can turn Facebook on, add a different image if you didn't want your title image, add a title, description, an app ID, which is totally optional. Turn on Twitter, add an image, share text, handle, and again, a short URL, but that's optional. We always have these off by default on mobile, but you can turn them on if you would like to. Next up is our CSS and JavaScript, so aka our two development tools here. So I know I've said it a couple of times, but one of the reasons Shorthand is so great and why many people love using it is because you don't need to be a coder to be able to put these great stories together. However, if you do work with a wider development team, or maybe you're proficient in coding yourself, then you can look to use the CSS and JavaScript to add further customizations to your stories. Finally, the last icon along here is our support. So if you are looking for any information about any of the sections, such as the media section, then you can type that into here and have a read through of the support document. We also have an SEO starter guide. You might want to have a read through that as well. Or planning documents. We also have planning documents. Maybe if you kind of like the idea of planning a story, but you think, how am I going to do that? Oh, sorry, my keyboard's going a bit weird. Then we do have a couple of templates that you can look to use if you wanted to as well. Finally, if you can't find what you're looking for, then you can reach out to us at help@shorthand.com, or you can send a ticket through our support service here. Now, bearing all's well with this story, it will be time for me to publish this now. So you do need to check whether or not you have been given publishing permission from the owner of your organization first. Now I have all of the different options unlocked on here, but I've done my research and I know that most of you on here are going to be using the shorthand hosting. So I'll talk about that kind of first and foremost. So with the shorthand hosting, you get a shorthandstories.com subdomain. But you can also override that or mask that with your own subdomain as well. So I've just got training.shorthandstories.com, but you could have something like stories.mycompany.com. And then each time you publish a story, it's going to recommend that you use the title of your story as the directory on the end of that URL. And while that loads, I will just quickly sort of reference the zip export here and the prepare for publish. These relate to our download and zip export. So that would be downloading a zip file that contains all of the files that make up the web page, and then you would physically put that onto your own servers. We also have plugins directly for WordPress and Drupal that allow you to publish directly there. And then we also have publishing to SFTP or S3 buckets as well. So those are all of the export options that are available in Shorthand, and that is an add-on to the plans as well. And it's only available on Pro and above. But my Shorthand hosting is now published, so my story is now live. It's now crawlable by Google. Now you might be thinking, if I've published this kind of over here on this great subdomain that I've set up, but how am I going to integrate this closely with my own website? Well, you have a couple of options available for you, again, depending on what you opt for and what plan you are on. The first option is using our story launcher, which is a little tile that you would embed into your site that would then open up the story. So I'll show you an example of that. The other option would be the shorthand embed, which allows you to embed the whole story into your site. So again, I'll show you a version of that. So the first one, the story launcher, is a little tile here that they've embedded into their site. You enter the shorthand story, you scroll through that story, and then when the reader has finished reading it, they can close and return back to the page that they started in. And you'll see that the link at the top never changes. So the reader feels that they actually never leave your site. They're just launching this wonderful digital experience and then they've returned to where they came from. Now, the way that you would use that particular embed is you would publish the story first, and then once the story is published, you can click promote your story, and then you need to put in the URL here where the story is published, so the physical shorthandstories.com domain in here. So it would be this link, promote your story, and then copy that to clipboard, and then you put that into your CMS. The other embed is allowing you to put the whole story into a container on your CMS, so a full width container. So this header here is Sky's own header, and then this is a shorthand story. So it does remove that extra clip that the story launcher gives you. The way that you would use that embed is you would click publish here, and if it's enabled for you on your account, you would see copy embed code, and then you would directly put that code into your CMS. Now, this version does require sometimes a little bit of hand holding because it's a direct integration. You need to ensure that your header and the shorthand header are working together, or that you've just, maybe hidden the shorthand header like Sky have done here. But often there are a few CSS conflicts that it's nothing scary, but just that we would advise on. So usually there might be code and shorthand code in your site that aren't quite matching up, and then we would make some changes on the shorthand side to make sure that it's going to work within your environment. So just usually a bit more of a lead time on that one, just making sure it is working how it should. That is the end of this pre-recorded webinar. If you do have any questions, please email us on hello@shorthand.com. And don't forget to check out the links below this video. Have a wonderful day.